I would say that this is an opportunity for young people to step up to holding local political leaders accountable. Now, I say this because when you look at these issues and how they are happening far Middle East, far off from Nigeria, but then you can see all of the consequences on the Nigerian economy, on the Nigerian agricultural market, and all of such. Um, it's simply because of the fact that um, there are not enough, should I say, strategies, in place, to be able to cushion these effects. And these strategies can only come into place as a result of politics and how politics is organized, within the country. I give you an instance. At the moment, the food reserves in Nigeria, I think it's about Nigeria has about 33 silos, across the country, and cumulatively, they could be able to store up to 1.1 million metric tons. You know, um, if you read one of the reports, produced by the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development in 2023, where it reported on the strategic food reserve in Nigeria, it was clear that on the emergency reserve, portfolio in Nigeria, we have a deficit of 2.5 million metric tons. On the buffer stocks, portfolio in Nigeria, we have a deficit of about 1.3 million. When you put both together, you see that our food storage deficit is over 4 million. And at the moment, what we have across 33 silos, with 17 of these 33 silos already concession to private players, what we have is a sum of about 1.1, 1.13. What that tells you is that if a, a, something so disastrous happens, globally, such a way that food supply chains are affected, Nigeria wouldn't really have the capacity to contain, supply of food to its over 200 million population. So this is an opportunity for Nigerians to, begin to make bold conversations and interesting conversations on what's the strategy of our government to make sure that folks are safe, that citizens, are safe amidst whatever happening elsewhere in the world, that would have like remote consequences, on us as a people. I think when we can be able to restructure and reframe these conversations in way that border on our local politics and that border on our expectations as citizens on the politicians, that's when we can begin to, say that all of these things happening will definitely have benefits for us, in the long run. But at the moment, they are providing insights into the kind of conversations we should be having with politicians, in terms of our food reserves, in terms of our proven oil, reserves, do we have the capacity to sustain, the country if conflicts are protracted, elsewhere, like Iran, or somewhere where we get our resources from. If these conflicts are protracted for like 1 year, for like 2 years, 3 years, can we stand a chance of survival? In all of these, conversations, and of course, production capacity, and all of these conversations will come into the picture.
Yeah, it's important we highlighted that, and it's good the way you've taken to speak to that, because it's important that we, as a sovereign nation, know where we're going to when these conflicts arise. One of the things that has been playing out is the Iranians saying, hey, we're going to be supporting Nigeria to fight its battle against terror. I mean, while all this is going, and you have the Israelis on the other side speaking to some of our journalists, speaking to governments. What should Nigeria do? Take sides, stay neutral? I mean, where do we go, especially for the young people? Because these guys are saying, hey, we're going to help you train your terrorists, fight against the terrorists, rather. If Iran is the ones who are going to be helping us to fight the terrorists, where does that pitch us against Israel and the US? How do we play? How do we meddle into this?
Thank you so much, Nat. Let's not forget the fact that um, at the moment, if folks who pay attention to news, would listen to the narrative in Iran, that the triggers of, those protests and everything, were sponsored, of course, the Western actors. And that's, the US, and all of these. Um, Also, let's not also forget the fact that uh, with what's happening in Iran, you don't lose sight of the fact that terrorist groups who, base their ideologies on Islamic fundamentalism are able to, stay on these, conflicts, happening in Iran, because of the fact that this is happening. This is happening, more like against a prominent country within the Islamic space. And then they can stay on that to begin to make arguments, around jihad and all of the whole campaigns and advocacies against Western interests. So let's not lose the fact that what's happening in Iran could be the basis on which some terrorist groups and some terrorist organizations can begin to, make arguments in favor of their crusade or their beliefs or whatsoever, or their advocacies or whatsoever, and they could use, these as sentiments, for recruitment. So let's not lose sight of that. And in the event of, as you said, is already happening, where does Nigeria stand in terms of when they are being called, into the possibility of taking sides? The clear answer would be Nigeria should do what it has historically, traditionally, and we have provided statistics and information as to the relationship Nigeria also has with the Middle East, and with particularly Iran, or in terms of food supplies, in terms of fertilizer, um, 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 and in terms of keeping the population healthy when it comes to food and nutrition. So you don't want to lose that relationship, of course, just because you want to, let's say, appeal, to the US. But then again, you also do not want to lose the relationship with the US. And so all the country has to do, or those who are in charge of making decisions with respect to this, is to make sure that they still do what they've done traditionally, which is to stay neutral, and that should be it. Thank you so much, Nat.
Yes. So, I mean, I have just two questions briefly. You have to answer briefly before we go. One of them would be, if this continues to escalate as we see it right now, I mean, bombings are still going on in the UAE and the likes, right? If it continues to escalate, how does this affect us economically, politically, and otherwise? And then the last question would also be, finally, for the youths, what's the responsibility of the young Nigerian when it comes to posting comments, sharing opinions, with regards to this war? I think that's where we would anchor on.
So at the moment, I, with all sense of humility, I do not really think that Nigeria would have the capacity to sustain its food space and to sustain local demand for petroleum products if this conflict continues. And that's why Nigerians would have to begin to get into conversations of governance and how we can be able to keep ourselves as a country, um, even in times when conflicts are happening elsewhere, with remote and direct consequences on us, as a country. And then for the youth, I want to say that um, um, framing these conversations around governance, around politics, around stable economy, and much more around sustainability is important. And by sustainability, I mean to say that, so what's the plan for Nigeria, let's say in the next 10 years? Let's say some kind of hardship, hits the world. How can Nigeria get to survive, let's say in the next 3 years, in the next 2 years, and all of those conversations. And this is why I would want to also say that I think a missing component in Nigeria's political conversation is what I refer to as the expectation middle. The expectation middle is more like a buffer between what citizens want and what politicians, should provide. I dare say that in many instances, politicians sometimes do not even understand what citizens want. So the expectation middle it's usually rowdy. It's not directed at
All right.
issues as they should. For instance, you get to hear Nigerians in the event of wanting to make mention of healthcare as an issue for them. They just say health services are not functioning.
Doctor,
Healthcare,
we have run out of time actually.
okay.
Yes,
Okay.
so I must thank you, Dr. Agu, Prince Agu, for your insight and clarity. And thank you really for the thoughtful engagement we have had in this important conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nat.